So to start off today, I'd like everyone to imagine that they're in a scenario where you're meeting two new people for the first time. Now, person one, they seem really talkative, they have expressed very many opinions, and they also tell too much history. Person two, though, engages in small talk, is a good listener, and seems like an open person. Who do you think made the better first impression? It's person two, right? Because he used many of the tips that I will teach you today to make a good first impression. So, who in this room has made a bad first impression or has heard a bad first impression? I know that I have, and using this information can help you to make better impressions from now on. So, first impressions are important because they can determine the outcome of job interviews or new relationships, and so by having a good impression, you can impress everyone you meet. So the first thing I'm going to talk about will be the importance of first impression. Secondly, the no's of what not to do. And finally, I will discuss what to do and good tips to make a good first impression. So the first thing you need to know is that the brain makes a first impression amazingly fast. Within a tenth of a second, it actually has already started figuring out who you are and what you're like. Within 60 seconds, your brain has made 10,000 visual cues of who you are as a person. First impressions can also be extremely hard to change, and this can be due to the primary effect. And what that is that people tend to put information that they learn first about a person rather than information they learn later. And another thing that is important to know is that it can take a long time to change a first impression. It actually takes 6 months to change a first impression, and this is regular contact with the person. And this information comes from McKay's artofmanliness.com. So now that you know that, you can tell that impression forms just like that. But not only is it important to know why it's important, it's also important to know what not to do. So the first thing you shouldn't do is don't try too hard or give too much history about yourself. Trying to be too different from the average can make the other person feel uncomfortable. You also don't want to tell too much history about yourself because you could lead to embarrassing moments and it might cause disconnects with the other person. The second don't overly talk too much or ask nosy questions. You should be talking enough so that you have a back and forth conversation with the person, but it shouldn't be just you ranting on about this and that. And you don't want to ask nosy questions because you can ask questions and that's okay, like how are you or how about you, but you need to know boundaries because you never know what kind of situation they're in. And finally, you don't want to assume that they'll always agree with you or that you can trust them. Your views are not their views too, so they could have different views and you shouldn't just think that they're the same. And information comes from whitbornpsychologytoday.com. So now all of you guys know what not to do, and if you do any of these things, hopefully from now on you'll say, okay, I won't do that anymore. But you're probably wondering, well, what should I do? Well, that's what I'm going to be covering next. The first two things you should do is have a good appearance and exercise positive body language. If you look good, you feel good, and other people will notice that. Body language is actually super important for their first impression because it affects 4 times more than what you actually say for the first impression. The next things you should do is engage in small talk and talk about positive things. Small talk can help relax you and the other person, and it can also lead to perhaps you getting to know a little bit more about them. You also don't want to talk about negative things because people don't want to talk about that or hear you rant about this and that. And if you talk about positive things, it can show that you have a good attitude. Finally, just be yourself because they're probably also nervous and they also have to make a good first impression. So if you make them more comfortable, you will also feel more comfortable. And then you just got to be you. And that is written by Mr. Economy from Inc.com. So as I've told you in this speech, I've told you why first impressions are important, what not to do, and tips on how to make better first impressions. Now remember, first impressions are super important because they determine the outcome of interviews and new relationships, so you want to have good ones so you can impress everybody. Now, at the start of my speech, I gave everyone a scenario about who made the better first impression. And well, I can't tell you that everyone will make a good impression as person 2 did. If you use the tips I told you though, then you will always make a good first impression from now on.